Lysera drifted through the corridors of the orbital station, her footsteps echoing softly against the metal walls. The station hung like a jewel in the void, orbiting a quiet blue star that cast pale light over its sprawling decks. Even though the view outside the reinforced glass was breathtaking, she felt none of the wonder. She had seen beauty in many corners of the galaxy, but none of it could pierce the barrier that had grown around her. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. The other diplomats, the traders, the ambassadors, they all recoiled when she approached. Her face bore the scars of a terrible accident years ago, and in a galaxy obsessed with perfection, those marks made her untouchable, unapproachable, a constant reminder of fragility. Lysera had long learned that trying to explain herself, or pleading for understanding, was pointless. The galaxy did not pity the broken. It ignored them, or worse, it mocked them. She paused by a viewing port, letting her fingers rest lightly on the glass. Beyond the station's hull, ships glinted in the distance, like fireflies against the endless darkness. She had once dreamed of traveling among them, moving freely through the stars. But those dreams had been replaced with caution. The scars weren't just on her face, they were etched into her life. Every council meeting, every negotiation, every casual encounter reminded her of one unchanging fact. She was alone. Lysera had once tried to reach out to be part of the galactic community. She had spoken at conferences, attended diplomatic gatherings, and even smiled at others in the corridors. But every attempt ended the same way. Aliens, humans, and others alike would look at her, and the warmth in their eyes would freeze. They avoided her as if contact could contaminate them. And so, she moved through life like a shadow, present but unseen. She had grown used to the solitude, almost comfortable in its predictability. She spent hours in the station's archives, reading old records of diplomacy and interstellar treaties. Knowledge was a refuge. Here she could measure herself against history, against the great minds of the past, rather than against the petty judgments of her contemporaries. It was on one such quiet day that the alarms blared. The shrill sound made her start, and she nearly dropped the datapad she had been holding. She frowned, glancing at the holographic display that flickered to life before her. Red alerts flashed. AI malfunction, station orbit unstable. The council staff, hesitant and cautious, would debate endlessly before acting. And there was no time for debate now. She raced toward the control hub, her long cloak brushing against the floor. The corridor was unusually empty, silence broken only by the distant hum of the station's engines. When she arrived, the main control room was a flurry of activity. Technicians moved with precision, but uncertainty shadowed their faces. The AI had always been flawless, or so everyone had assumed. Now its behavior was unpredictable and the station's very orbit was at risk. Lysera's eyes scanned the panels. She didn't recognize the human name flashing on the alert board, one that indicated a new ship had just docked. She frowned. Humans were rarely involved directly in council operations unless invited, and they were often considered too reckless, too impulsive for such delicate matters. And yet, there it was, an incoming human ship sending a message to the station. "Captain Jonah requesting immediate docking clearance," the technician said, voice tight with tension. "He claims he can stabilize the AI." Minutes later, the docking bay doors hissed open. A human figure stepped out, tall and unassuming, his uniform slightly wrinkled as if he had just hurried from another crisis. There was a confidence in his movements, a calm that contrasted sharply with the panic in the control room. He scanned the room, eyes settling briefly on Lysera before he approached the central console. "I hear you're having trouble with the AI," he said casually, voice steady. No bow, no formal greeting, just a human speaking plainly. Lysera blinked. It was unusual for a human to address her directly. Usually they either ignored her presence entirely or treated her with exaggerated politeness as though they feared offending her. But this man, this Captain Jonah, did neither. He spoke to the problem, not the person, yet somehow included her in a way that made her notice him. She found herself observing the way he moved, the way he analyzed the situation. Unlike the other technicians who followed protocol rigidly, Jonah seemed to think several steps ahead. His fingers flew across the controls, issuing commands and recalculating variables almost instinctively. He laughed quietly to himself at one point, a light, confident sound that seemed impossibly human. Minutes passed, each one stretching with tension. Lysera remained rooted in place, watching him. She had seen skilled diplomats, brilliant engineers, and fearless explorers, but there was something different about him. He seemed alive in a way that the station, the council, and even the galaxy often forgot. Finally, the red warning lights dimmed. The AI's system stabilized, the orbit returned to normal, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the control room. The technicians exchanged astonished glances. The human had succeeded where others had hesitated, where countless warnings had predicted failure. Lysera felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. She had not expected to be impressed, not by anyone, let alone a human, but here it was. And more strangely, she felt no fear, no judgment, only admiration. Jonah turned toward her then, a slight smile playing on his lips. Looks like everything's under control now. I'd suggest more routine maintenance, but that's not nearly as exciting as a crisis. But really, you should have been here sooner. You'd have helped more than you think. And yet this human had treated her as if none of that mattered, as if her value was measured by her mind, her courage, her choices. As the control room began to settle back into normal activity, Lysera felt a shift within herself. She had spent so long building walls, so long accepting isolation as inevitable, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. And now someone had looked directly at her, not at her scars, not at her reputation, but at her. For a brief, unspoken moment, she allowed herself to imagine possibilities. Could this human be different from the others? Could he actually bridge the distance she had spent a lifetime maintaining? Jonah's laughter broke through her thoughts again. Don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble. At least, not intentionally. And for the first time in many years, Lysera felt alive in the presence of another being. Not because she had been saved, or praised, or acknowledged, but because in his presence she had been seen as herself, and that was more than anyone else in the galaxy had ever done. Lysera stood silently in the control room, her mind still racing from the events that had just unfolded. The AI system was stable, the station's orbit safe, and the alarms had ceased. Yet, despite the calm, a sense of restless energy lingered in the air, almost as if the station itself was holding its breath. She found herself watching Captain Jonah as he moved among the technicians, issuing instructions, adjusting settings, and occasionally leaning over to offer a reassuring word. There was something in his presence that drew her attention, something she could not name. It was not his appearance. Humans were often ordinary in ways the galaxy overlooked, but the way he carried himself, with confidence, patience, and a quiet sense of humor. He worked quickly, but there was no panic in his actions, only focus. Lysera felt herself studying him, noting the ease with which he connected with others, the way he made even the most nervous technician feel capable. Lysera! Jonah's voice broke through her thoughts. He was walking toward her, a small grin on his face, hands relaxed at his sides. I know you probably think I just lucked into fixing that AI, but I promise, luck had very little to do with it. You noticed things that others missed, that is why it worked. In a galaxy obsessed with perfection, with rules and appearances, he was saying that value came from doing, from trying, from daring to act when others hesitated. Before she could respond, a technician hurried toward them, carrying a data pad. Captain, we've detected anomalies in the AI's secondary system. It's minor, but if left unattended, it could cause instability in the docking bay. She nodded, surprising herself with the speed of her decision. Show me, she said. They moved together to the secondary control hub, a smaller room lined with holographic panels and blinking indicators. Jonah's approach was methodical but intuitive. He didn't rely solely on protocol. He observed, adjusted, and tested as he went. Lysera found herself explaining certain quirks of the station to him, the small details others often ignored. He listened carefully, absorbing everything, then incorporated it into his plan. Minutes turned into hours as they worked side by side. Lysera realized she had not felt this focused or alive in years. The usual exhaustion that came from social isolation, from the constant pressure of being judged and rejected, was absent. In its place was a curious sense of partnership, of shared purpose. Jonah was not just competent, he made her feel competent too. At one point, an alarm sounded again, minor this time, and Lysera instinctively leaned toward the console. Jonah reached out, lightly touching her shoulder. I've got it, he said calmly. You just keep me informed of anything unusual. The work continued, and soon they discovered that the AI's secondary system had been tampered with, subtle sabotage designed to make the station appear unstable. Lysera's mind raced. The council would have blamed her, or worse, used this as another reason to reject her. The implications were serious. Jonah, however, remained calm. He studied the data, analyzed the patterns, and turned to her. We can trace this, he said. Someone tried to make the AI fail, but they left clues. Whoever did this underestimated how precise humans can be with deduction. She realized with a quiet thrill that Jonah exemplified this. He didn't just act, he thought, adapted, and overcame. They traced the sabotage to a small maintenance bot, reprogrammed to create minor errors. Jonah's hands moved quickly, issuing commands to isolate the bot and run diagnostic tests. Lysera followed his lead, assisting where she could. Together, they uncovered evidence that pointed to a rival faction attempting to undermine the Council's credibility. As they worked, Jonah talked quietly, as if to fill the silence. He shared stories of his travels, of human ingenuity in situations others had considered impossible. Lysera found herself laughing unexpectedly, caught up in his easy humor. For the first time, she felt the weight of her isolation lift, even if only slightly. "You know," Jonah said at one point, leaning back against the console, "humans have this habit of seeing possibilities where others see problems. Some call it recklessness. I call it opportunity." He embodied that idea, someone who faced danger, uncertainty, and judgment with courage and creativity. And yet he did not boast. He acted, and he inspired others to act too. The hours passed quickly, and by the time they had fully secured the AI and traced the sabotage, the station was calm once more. Lysera leaned against a console, breathing deeply, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Jonah, still energetic, turned toward her. "You did well," he said simply. "I couldn't have done this alone." He respected her abilities, her intelligence, her presence. And in that moment, Lysera felt something shift inside her. She realized she was beginning to trust him. Not fully, not yet, but enough to acknowledge that humans, at least this human, were capable of seeing beyond the surface, beyond scars, beyond reputation. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for connection she had long thought impossible. As the station settled into quiet activity once more, Jonah prepared to return to his ship. He paused at the door, glancing back at her. "You should come with me sometime. See the stars from another angle. Humans have a way of making the impossible look possible." "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. Jonah smiled, a brief, easy expression that seemed to light the room. "That's all I ask." Instead, she felt the first stirring of something new, curiosity, excitement, and a sense of possibility she had not allowed herself to feel in years. For the first time in a long time, Lysera realized that perhaps not all humans were reckless, and perhaps not all beings in the galaxy were meant to reject her. And as she watched the lights of his ship fade into the distance, she understood that the galaxy might not be as lonely as she had believed. That night, Lysera walked to the viewing port once more. She stared at the endless stars, the tiny pinpricks of light scattered across the darkness. She thought of Jonah, of the way he had faced danger and uncertainty with courage, and of the way he had treated her, not with fear or disgust or pity, but with respect and recognition. For the first time in many years, she allowed herself to hope. And hope, she realized, could be more powerful than any shield, more freeing than any solitude, and more compelling than any fear. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknown dangers and countless civilizations. But for the first time, Lysera felt that perhaps she had found one person who could make her see it in a different way, not as a place of judgment and rejection, but as a place of possibility, adventure, and connection. And in that quiet, infinite moment, Lysera smiled, a small but real expression of life returning. Lysera woke to the hum of the station's engines and the distant chatter of technicians beginning their morning routines. The events of the previous day still lingered in her mind, a quiet echo she could not shake. Captain Jonah's presence had left a mark, not just because he had solved the AI crisis, but because he had shown her something she had almost forgotten: that humans could inspire, act boldly, and see the world in ways others overlooked. She moved to the viewing port, watching ships drift through the station's orbit. The stars beyond were sharp and endless, each one a reminder of the vastness of space. Normally, she would have felt small and insignificant among them, but now there was something different. She felt a spark of possibility, as if the universe had quietly shifted in her favor. The calm was broken by a sudden alert. Red lights flashed, and the familiar alarm tone filled the room. Lysera's pulse quickened. She hurried to the nearest console, scanning the display. Another AI disturbance, but this one was far more complex. The secondary system had stabilized, but new anomalies were appearing in the station's core systems. If left unchecked, the station's life support could fail, endangering everyone on board. Lysera realized immediately that she would need help. But there was one person she wanted first: Jonah. She sent a message to his ship using the Council's communication channels. To her surprise, he responded almost instantly, his tone casual as ever. "I was hoping you'd decall. What's the situation?" "I need your assistance." The room was vast, lined with holographic displays that flickered with streams of data. Lysera's fingers danced across the controls, highlighting anomalies, isolating subsystems, and tracing irregularities in the AI's behavior. Jonah followed, his movements precise yet fluid, a human combination of intuition and experience. "This is more than a simple malfunction," Jonah said, scanning the data. "Someone is actively interfering with the AI. It's too coordinated to be accidental." They began tracing the interference, analyzing every signal, every code sequence, and every anomaly. Hours passed as they worked, side by side. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the station and the occasional click of holographic keys. Lysera was struck by Jonah's methodical approach. He did not panic, even as the anomalies grew more complex. Instead, he adjusted, recalculated, and pushed forward, his confidence unshaken. "You know," he said quietly, breaking the silence, "most people would give up at this point. They'd panic, blame someone else, or just wait for instructions. Humans, we tend to keep going." "Part of it, yes. Humans act on hope, curiosity, and a stubborn belief that they can make a difference. It's not always smart, but it works often enough." As they worked, Lysera noticed a pattern emerging. The anomalies were concentrated in the station's power distribution nodes. If they could isolate the affected nodes, they could contain the sabotage. But doing so required someone to manually access the physical systems deep within the station's core. A dangerous task, given the potential for electrical surges and unstable systems. Jonah looked at her. "I'll go, you stay here and guide me. Your knowledge of the station is more valuable than mine." The hum of the station was louder here, the vibrations of engines and machinery surrounding them. Every step required caution. The sabotage could trigger at any moment. Lysera's hand brushed against the metal railing as she followed Jonah. Her mind was sharp, alert to every detail. She realized that despite the danger, she felt more alive than she had in years. The fear that had defined her life was present, but it was tempered by determination and trust. She trusted Jonah not blindly, but because he had earned it through skill, courage, and respect. They reached the first affected node. Sparks flickered, and a faint smell of ozone filled the air. Jonah knelt, carefully opening the control panel. Lysera knelt beside him, her fingers hovering over the interface. They worked together seamlessly, isolating the corrupted data and rerouting power to stabilize the node. "It's delicate," Jonah said, eyes focused. "One wrong move and the entire sector could go dark. We need precision, not speed." Jonah looked at her, a mixture of pride and relief in his eyes. "Not bad," he said, smiling. "You're even better under pressure than I imagined." They continued their work, moving from node to node, encountering minor hazards and irregularities. Each challenge required coordination, trust, and creative thinking. Lysera found herself speaking more freely than she had in years, offering suggestions, improvising solutions, and laughing quietly at Jonah's occasional lighthearted remarks. Hours later, they reached the final node. This one was critical. It controlled the station's central energy distribution, and failure here could endanger every life on board. Jonah knelt beside the panel, analyzing the corrupted code. Lysera joined him, her mind sharp and precise. "This is complex," Jonah said. "The sabotage is layered, designed to mask the true source. Whoever did this knows the station intimately. It could be someone within the Council, someone with access to sensitive systems. We must proceed carefully." Finally, after hours of meticulous work, the final node stabilized. The alarms ceased, the lights returned to normal, and the station hummed with restored energy. Lysera leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. Jonah straightened beside her, brushing sweat from his brow. "We did it," he said simply. "The station is safe." "Together," she added, and felt a sense of pride she had not known in years. Jonah's gaze lingered on her. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "Not because of what you can do alone, but because of how you face challenges. Most people would have given up long before this." She had spent so long feeling rejected, unseen, and undervalued. Yet here was someone who had recognized her strength, her courage, and her worth. As they made their way back to the control room, Lysera realized that her perception of humans and of the galaxy was changing. Jonah was not just an exception. He represented a possibility she had never considered. that humans could inspire, act bravely, and connect with others in ways no other species could. By the time they reached the control room, the station's systems were fully operational, and the threat had been neutralized. The technicians looked at them with a mix of relief and awe, but Lysera's attention was focused solely on Jonah. He moved with the same calm confidence, unaffected by the praise, yet quietly aware of his impact. "You were amazing," she said, almost in a whisper. Jonah looked at her, eyes meeting hers, and for a moment the chaos of the station, the alarms, and the flashing lights faded. "So were you," he replied. "We make a good team." It was more than trust, more than admiration. It was a recognition of shared strength, of partnership, and perhaps of the beginning of something far greater than either of them had expected. As the station settled into quiet activity once more, Lysera knew one thing with certainty. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and uncertainty, but also full of possibilities. And with humans like Jonah, she realized that even the most isolated, rejected, or scarred among them could find connection, purpose, and hope. That night, as she looked out at the endless stars, Lysera allowed herself to imagine a future she had long thought impossible. A future where courage, intelligence, and the human spirit could not only survive but thrive. And in that vision, she saw herself no longer alone, no longer defined by scars or rejection, but part of something greater. For the first time in her life, she felt that the galaxy was not a place to endure. It was a place to conquer, explore, and embrace. And she would not face it alone. The station had quieted after the long hours of chaos, but the calm felt fragile, like a thin layer of ice over a deep void. Lysera walked through the corridors, her mind replaying the events of the past day. The sabotage had been contained, the AI stabilized, yet an unsettling tension lingered. She knew the attack was no accident. Someone on the station had intentionally tried to destabilize it. Jonah was in the command center, reviewing logs and communications for any signs of the saboteur. He moved with the same effortless focus that had impressed Lysera from the beginning. She watched him work, noting the patience and precision in every movement. Unlike most humans who relied on instinct first, Jonah combined instinct with careful analysis, a balance that made him formidable. "Lysera," he said without looking up, "come here, I want to show you something." These messages were embedded in the AI's core code, he explained. Someone tried to mask their origin, but the patterns are consistent. We can trace them. Could it be a member of the Council, or a rogue faction seeking to manipulate events for personal gain? "Can we identify the sender?" she asked. Jonah nodded. "Yes, but it will require a risky maneuver. We have to access a restricted server deep in the station's security sector. If we're caught, it could cause political complications. But the truth is more important than caution. We do this together." Lysera felt her senses sharpen, every sound and movement amplified in her awareness. She had spent years navigating social danger and alien prejudice, but now she navigated physical danger, a new, exhilarating challenge. Finally, they reached the security sector. The server room was vast, filled with humming machines and blinking lights. Jonah knelt at the control interface, analyzing security protocols while Lysera traced the encrypted messages. Together, they worked with quiet precision, their skills complementing each other perfectly. "There," Jonah said, pointing to a sequence in the code. "The source is internal, someone on the Council itself. They could deny everything, frame someone else. How do we expose them without causing chaos? The station's stability is more important than politics." Anger at the betrayal, satisfaction that the truth was now within reach. Jonah leaned back, exhaling. "We need to confront them carefully. If we act rashly, it could escalate into an interstellar incident. But we can't wait too long, they might strike again. We need a plan." When the meeting began, Lysera took the lead, presenting the evidence clearly and calmly. The council members reacted with shock, disbelief, and outrage. Jonah supported her, adding technical explanations and highlighting the saboteur's precise manipulation of the AI. Their combined effort left no doubt. The ambassador had attempted to destabilize the station for personal gain. The saboteur tried to defend themselves, using political rhetoric and intimidation, but Lysera and Jonah remained unshaken. Their evidence was meticulous, their reasoning clear, and their confidence unwavering. Even the most skeptical council members had to acknowledge the truth. When the vote was called to remove the ambassador from power and place them under investigation, it passed unanimously. The station was secure, the saboteur exposed and the immediate threat neutralized. Lysera felt a surge of relief, but also an unexpected pride. She had faced danger, deception, and political manipulation, and she had prevailed. Jonah approached her after the meeting, a faint smile on his face. "You were incredible," he said. "Calm, precise, decisive. I'm glad I had you by my side." And it was not just recognition, it was shared achievement, a partnership forged through challenge and trust. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "Your creativity and courage, they made all the difference. But I wouldn't be me without someone like you helping me stay grounded." As the station settled into calm once more, Lysera and Jonah walked together through the corridors. Their conversation was easy, filled with light humor and thoughtful observation. They discussed the sabotage, the technical solutions, and even speculated on who might have supported the ambassador behind the scenes. Each topic drew them closer, deepening the connection that had begun during the AI crisis. By the time they reached the viewing port, the stars outside had shifted, casting a pale glow over the station. Lysera looked at the distant galaxies, her thoughts drifting. She realized that the galaxy was not just a place of danger and isolation, it was also a place of possibility, creativity, and unexpected connection. And Jonah embodied that possibility. He noticed her gaze and joined her at the port. "You're quiet," he said softly, "thinking about the stars. And about how small we feel, even in a galaxy this vast, yet how much we can accomplish if we work together." She had spent years believing that her scars, her history, and her reputation would always separate her from others. Yet here was proof to the contrary. Not only could she make a difference, but she could do so alongside someone who valued her completely. The night passed, and the station remained calm. But Lysera knew the galaxy would not stay quiet forever. Challenges, threats, and dangers would return as they always did. Yet she no longer felt isolated, no longer felt powerless. She had faced sabotage, deceit, and fear, and she had prevailed. And by her side was Jonah, human in every way, brilliant, courageous, and inspiring. Together, they had exposed betrayal, protected the station, and strengthened the fragile trust that held the council together. As Lysera stood at the port, watching the stars, she allowed herself a rare moment of hope. Perhaps the galaxy was not a place of rejection and solitude, but a place where courage, intelligence, and partnership could triumph. And perhaps in this vast expanse, she had found someone who could see her fully, respect her completely, and inspire her to embrace her own strength. For the first time, Lysera believed that she was not just surviving the galaxy, she was part of it, shaping it, and capable of rising above its dangers. And she knew that, together with Jonah, she could face whatever came next. The station drifted peacefully through space, its systems stable and its corridors calm. After the exposure of the saboteur, a sense of relief had spread among the inhabitants. Yet for Lysera, the quiet felt different from before. It was no longer empty or cold. It felt like a pause before a new beginning. She stood alone near the viewing port, watching a distant nebula glow softly against the dark. The colors shifted slowly, like a living painting. In the past, she would have watched such sights with a sense of distance, as if beauty existed only outside her reach. Now she felt connected to it, as if the universe itself had opened a small door just for her. Footsteps approached behind her. She did not turn immediately, but she already knew who it was. Jonah stopped beside her, resting his hands lightly on the railing. He followed her gaze, silent for a moment. "Hard to believe how quickly things can change," he said quietly. "A few days ago, this station was on the edge of disaster. And a few days ago, I believed my place in this galaxy was very small. Then most beings are wrong." Others sought her opinion openly. She had been invited to lead a task force to redesign the station's AI safeguards, a role that recognized her intelligence and experience. Yet the greatest change was not political. It was personal. Jonah had remained on the station longer than planned. Officially, it was to assist with system upgrades and ensure long-term stability. Unofficially, Lysera knew the truth. He stayed because he wanted to. They spent hours working together, but also talking about human worlds, alien cultures, quiet fears, and long-held dreams. Jonah spoke openly about humanity's flaws and strengths, about how humans often failed but always tried again. Lysera listened, fascinated, seeing her own struggles reflected in his stories. One evening, after a long day of work, Jonah invited her to visit his ship. "It's nothing special," he said with a small grin as they boarded. "By galactic standards, it's probably outdated." Personal items lined the walls, photos, symbols, small objects collected from different worlds. "You carry your history with you," she observed. Jonah nodded. "Humans do that. We remember where we've been. It helps us know where we're going." The silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Finally, Lysera broke it. "When I first saw you during the AI crisis, something changed inside me. But when you looked at me, you did not hesitate. You did not pity me. You did not turn away. That is what I felt. Not because I have to, because I choose to." A human captain and a scarred diplomat, working together with intelligence, courage, and trust. Humans, once considered reckless, were seen in a new light, not as careless risk-takers, but as adaptable problem-solvers who acted when others hesitated. Jonah became a symbol of that truth, though he never sought the attention. Lysera, too, became a symbol, proof that worth was not defined by appearance but by action and resolve. One day, Jonah received orders to return to human space. The message was clear, but the meaning weighed heavily on both of them. They stood once more at the viewing port, the same place where everything had quietly begun. "I don't want this to be goodbye," Jonah said. Lysera nodded. "Neither do I, but my duties are here, and yours are with your people." For someone who had been rejected her entire life, the idea that someone would choose her, freely, repeatedly, was almost unreal. As his ship prepared for departure, Lysera watched from the dock. She felt no fear this time, no familiar ache of abandonment, only confidence. Jonah paused at the ramp, turning back to her. "You know," he said, smiling, "humans believe that love makes us stronger. Braver, smarter." But she had not been broken, and somewhere among the stars was a human who had seen her clearly from the very first moment. For Lysera, the galaxy no longer felt cold or endless. It felt full of paths yet to be walked, challenges yet to be faced, and connections yet to be formed. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like an outcast among the stars. She felt like she belonged. And that, she realized, was the most powerful force in the universe of all.